Thanks so much for listening to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange. I'm sitting in the kitchen at Perch Hill and the garden's looking particularly lovely at the moment. And so I just wanted to do a kind of NB to anyone who's within shouting distance of Perch Hill, or not quite shouting distance, but travel distance, which is we're open for the next few months, a few days a month. And yeah, it would be really lovely to see you. So go on our website and you'll find all the details of booking there. You can book lunch on 3 different time slots, or you can just come and wander around the garden. So it's garden only or garden visit plus lunch. So I hope to see some of you then. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and various different guests, sometimes chefs. And today I'm joined by a chef who I've known a long time, who is a really dear man called Gill Meller. He's based down in the West Country. He's based near Bridport, one of the most beautiful parts of the country. I met Gill initially through River Cottage and Hugh Fernley Whittingstall, and he's been to Perch Hill quite a few times for our food festival that we did 10 or 15 years ago now, but he cooks just the sort of food that we all want to eat. So first thing is welcome, Gill. It's so nice to have you here. You were on the podcast a few years ago, weren't you? A couple of years ago or something.
I may well have been, but it's great to be back on again. Thank you so much. And it's lovely to see you, Sarah. It's been probably a few years since I last saw your page. So
it is. It has been a while. Anyway, I want us to talk about a theme that Gill has made his own in his newish book called Outside, that is unbelievably beautifully photographed by Andrew Montgomery, who is just such a great photographer for getting atmosphere and kind of more than just what's in front of your eyes, if you see what I mean. So it's more goes in a sort of deeper level than that, I always think, and that's what you're all about too, Gill. And the thing about Outside is, surprise, surprise, it's a cookbook about cooking outside, and something that, Gill, you're a leading expert on. It's become so trendy now, cooking on the fire, but you've been doing it forever.
Well, I've been doing it since I was a kid.
Yeah,
I grew up in it fairly rurally, so I was always outside mucking about, you know, in the fields and down the lanes and making campfires and things. The first thing I remember cooking was stewing up nettles and crayons together. Melt, just boiling
using
things
the
up
crayon
over fires
to stir.
Great fun. And ever since then, I've sort of been, excited and enthused by getting a fire going and cooking something over it. But it's only really in the sort of last 10, 15 years that, as you say, it's become quite popular. And even more recently, there's been a real surge for people to get out there and cook outside and just enjoy being, outside for a change instead of stuck inside. Maybe coming off the back of the sort of COVID thing. But it's definitely a passion of mine, and every time I do it, it's as exciting, if not more, than the last time.
Well, what do you do in the rain, or do you just not?
Well, I mean, obviously, you don't sort of head out there if it's sucking it down. But I remember being down on the beach with a group of my old college friends who have now got kids, and we were all down there, the kids and myself and the dogs and everyone. And it was a fine afternoon, and we got the fires going, and we were cooking this lovely food. And across the sea, this huge black cloud came rolling in, and under it, this intense storm just materialized, and driving rain, and all the fires got put out. We were completely soaked, drenched. All the food was spoilt, and we had these soggy hot dogs in our hands. And no sooner had it come than it had gone. But interestingly, and the reason I mention it is because that's one of the most wonderful experiences of outdoor cooking I've ever had, and everyone remembers it. Even the little kids that were with us now, many years
Really?
later, say, "Do you remember that storm?" And
Oh,
it was called Soggy Sausage Saturday.
oh, that's so good. Yeah, well, I'm right with you. I was spent a lot of time as a child on the west coast of Scotland, still do actually, and probably horrible cliche, but happy places in one's life. There's a particular inland sea loch on the west coast of Scotland where we went, and there's weirdly a sandy beach, which of course with inland you very rarely get, but it's just fed by so many rivers that it just dumps its kind of stone particles, whatever, on this particular bit, and it's just held. So there's this weird sandy beach in the middle of inland, and there's lots of gorse, which is good kindling, and always on a nice day we would always head out there as kids with our parents initially, and then on our own, and we would have canoes and we would catch fish and and yeah. So for me, that's where I tend to spend my summers and do exactly the same with my kids. And now I'm a granny. Hopefully I might do with my grandchildren. But
well, that is nice.
Yeah.
That is lovely. And you're still going back there now. It's amazing.
Yeah. Still definitely the place that sort of if I'm in the dentist or something, I think of myself lighting my fire and cooking there, and I have done all my life. So the beach is a big thing for you, isn't it, Gill? I mean, your house looks out over the cliffs. You're right by the sea.
We're very lucky where we live, on the Devon-Dorset border. And I've been here all my life. When I was younger, we lived sort of East Dorset, and now we're a bit further west. Well, right on the border with Devon. But we're just by the sea, and I love it. Yeah, I've always sort of gravitated towards the coast and the water, and I like old wooden boats and that sort of thing. My dad built boats, so we had this sort of connection to the coast. And it's quite a gentle walk down to the beach from where we are.
And it's not one of those manic beaches with 25 mobile homes parked up behind it.
No, it's not. It's quite remote. It's on this very unusual bit of coast called the Undercliff, which is quite well known in the area as there was a big landslip, and it sort of forged this sort of very hard to access stretch of wooded coastline that's completely unmanaged, really.
Wow.
So it's as wild as it was 1,000 years ago.
Gosh.
No one ever goes down there, but you can get through there and down to the beach, and even in the height of summer, there's only a handful of people there. So it's very nice to go and swim and cook, have a fire and hang out there for the afternoon.
Yeah, good. So onto food in itself. So have you got a few sort of absolute, if you were to say, this is my quintessential Gill Meller cooking, a kind of substantial thing on the fire? Will you give us a couple of examples?
Of course. Well, you probably, as you mentioned, our cooking styles are probably quite similar. We love a simple approach, seasonal eating, fairly uncomplicated. So a lot of the stuff that I do outside over fire is very much like that. And whether it's a piece of fish or some vegetables or grilling a steak, to be honest with you, it's all pretty achievable stuff. One of my favorite things is cooking tomatoes on the fire, to be honest with you. It just is the best way to cook them. Not everyone thinks about grilling tomatoes over embers, but it just accentuates everything that's good about them. It accentuates their sweetness, it caramelizes the sugars, it causes that sort of bitter contrast that works well, particularly with nice ripe tomatoes. It gives them a completely new texture. I mean, everything, sort of seems to get better. They become soft and blistered and rich and smoky. And my trick is to take little slithers of garlic, half the tomato, stick the little slithers of garlic into the soft this where the seeds, where the seeds sit, that sort of jelly-like void takes the garlic quite nicely. You only need 1 or 2 slithers per tomato half. Flaky salt and pepper, olive oil on the fire. 20 minutes later, pile them onto some toast, bruschetta that you've done on the fire, and that is absolute joy. Just the best way to cook and eat summer tomatoes. That would be a game changer for me any day. So I love that sort of simple approach to things. Sometimes we do courgettes in the same way. All that summer veg is brilliant cooked over fire.
I cheat a bit. So we historically have gone with the children too, but to an outer Hebrides called the Shants, which my husband Adam is involved with. And it's basically we camp. I mean, there's a little tiny bothy, but we do live outside. And I always take tomatoes because obviously there are no shops. You arrive by a fishing boat and you're there for 10 days. Yeah. Wow. And so there are certain things that are really good because feta, you don't need a fridge because there's no fridge. Tomatoes, capers and olives. And so one of my absolute standard lunch, when the kids were small, was pita bread, which again doesn't tend to go off if you keep it coolish somewhere. And so I would just get a sheet of tinfoil and just pack in feta, tomatoes, like you say, cut in half normally, and then some olives and capers, which are all store cupboard stuff. And then just wrap it up in tinfoil and shove it in the embers for 10 minutes with a bit of olive oil and perhaps some thyme. And then the kids, everyone, we can just dip in with the toasted pita bread. And that's just, you don't even need a plate. It's very, very, delish. Very tasty cooking on the fire.
I love that. But that's all in one parcel of happiness. Sounds great.
And tomatoes are so good, just as you say. I mean, that to me is a quintessential summer holiday thing. Great, and courgettes too. I totally agree.
Yeah, so all that summer veg is wonderful, but obviously there's more familiar things like cooking steak, cooking fish. Mackerel in season is wonderful. That's something I like to cook, particularly down on the beach. Scallops. We have a nice local fisherman called Harry, and he gets hold of lovely hand-dyed scallops, and cooking those on the fire is great. They've only come down from Lyme Regis, which is just down the road from where I am.
And do you cook them in the shell or?
Yeah, quite often cook them in the shell. So clean the scallop, put it back in the shell, and then put the shell in the embers and let them sizzle in the little frying pan, essentially, with some butter and garlic, sometimes some chorizo and parsley and things go in there. That's very, very, very nice indeed. I mean, really, the world's your oyster when it comes to cooking over fire. You just need to sort of have the confidence to do what you do inside, outside, and not worry too much if it doesn't quite work out how you hoped.
Because often it's even better. I wanted to get you to talk about just a little bit of prep that you may do the evening before to make it not even tastier, because those things that we've talked about are all incredibly tasty. But outside in the cookbook, I absolutely love your Tandoori venison haunch recipe, and I've done that a lot. Yeah. And that's because, again, the place I've mentioned on the west coast of Scotland where I cook on the fire next to the gorse bushes, venison is just like everywhere. And so it's the most sustainable meat that you can possibly get. And will you just talk us through that recipe? Because I think this is so adaptable and so brilliant. And I think this is a perfect example of something that you would get in an unbelievably fancy London restaurant and it would cost you £150 a head. And yet it's so easy.
That is a very, very nice recipe. I'm a huge fan of venison. It works beautifully cooked on the fire. And yes, you're right, a little bit of prep involved, but nothing too strenuous. The haunch, which is the back leg, can be quite lean. Venison is quite lean. And sometimes it can be a little bit tougher than meat from the saddle. In this recipe, I marinate it
Yeah.
So it goes into a spiced yogurt, essentially. Lots of lovely spices, cumin, coriander, chili, turmeric, curry powder, black onion seed. I'm sure there's all sorts of other things in there, cardamom, fenugreek.
Yeah.
Possibly didn't get into that recipe, but if it didn't, it should be in there because it's gone on to be my new favourite spice.
Has it? Okay.
The meat can either be on the bone or off the bone.
Mm-hmm.
It gets turned through the yogurt, this spiked yogurt, garlic maybe going in there, and it can be left overnight or maybe just for a few hours.
Yeah.
When you're ready to cook it, it gets seasoned and it goes onto the fire. The yogurt does help to tenderize it.
Yeah. And moisturize it.
Yeah, it sort of helps draw in some of that spicing.
Mm.
So you get this sort of best of both worlds. You get this vehicle to carry all the spices onto the meat. The acidity tenderizes the meat, and it creates almost this sort of crust, this sort of coating on the outside of the venison as it's cooking, which holds all the flavor.
And it's just like a much more sustainable version of tandoori chicken in the Indian restaurant. You know, that sort of caked. Yeah. That's what it reminds me of when I have it. But I much prefer it because it's kind of, I don't know, it's just got more guts to it somehow.
Well, it definitely has. And as you say, it's hugely sustainable.
Yeah.
And it's got, venison can carry all those strong spices, those punchy flavors. Because it's quite it can be quite a well-flavored meat in its own right. So it can sort of handle everything you throw at it and be better for it almost. So alongside that, you might have some flatbread dough that you can roll out and cook on the fire. Maybe a little tzatziki or some roast tomatoes spiced with a bit of garlic and maybe some nigella, black onion seed. And you can bring together a feast, a smoky wild feast, and you can rest assured that what you cook there and how that come together is ticking all the boxes. I think
it is ticking all the boxes. I'm right there. And what about sweet things on the fire? I have to admit, I'm not so good at this. I tend to just take some Mars bars or whatever. I mean, not to put on the fire, but just for pudding. But do you cook many puddings on the fire?
I don't cook a huge amount of puddings, I must admit, but I teach a outdoor cooking course during the spring and summer months.
How do people find out about that if they wanted to? Is that on your website?
I do that down through River Cottage.
Okay.
So I still have my I still have my sort of relationship with River Cottage, which is great, and every so often I'll be down there teaching the outdoor cooking course.
Yeah.
But that's a question I get asked a lot: is what sort of sweet thing can we cook on the fire? And sometimes in the late summer, we'll wander around the farm and pick some apples and pears from the trees, and come back to the fires. And a little bit like you suggested with the feta and olives and tomatoes, we'll make a parcel of sliced apples and pears, butter, soft brown sugar, maybe some bay leaves go in there, some pared lemon zest. And that gets baked in the embers.
Nice.
And comes out steamy and soft and lovely and sweet. And I mean, that kind of thing is just right. I mean, you don't need much more. Maybe a scoop of ice cream or some cold double cream on there. Yeah. And everyone's very happy. But I mean, you can do all sorts of things if you want to pull out the stops. Using a Dutch oven, for example,
yes,
you can really get creative with all sorts of sweet treat, baking cakes and sweetbreads. And I've got a plum and sage cake that I have cooked several times in a Dutch oven set over the fire. It's a fairly standard sort of cake batter.
Yeah,
with plums and sage and lemon,
nice.
And it goes in and pile the embers on top of the Dutch oven and bake it. You get the odd scorched edge, but part of the charm.
Yeah, that sounds good. And of course, you could do a tart tatin. I mean, you can, as you say, you can kind of do anything, I guess.
You can, yes.
And what are the easiest things to get wrong, Gill? I mean, I do. Well, I suppose we ought to just mention: be careful about fire, and all that kind of putting your fire out. And in parks, sadly, you're not allowed even to use, or some parks anyway, even one of those tinfoil barbecues, are you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you've got to be sensible. You've got to have sort of your common sense about it. But I think most people are pretty sensible when it comes to where you have fires and where you don't.
Yeah.
If it's been dry for a long time, then you probably wouldn't have a fire in the middle of the woods. But if you choose the right spot and you got the right kit, you shouldn't have any problems. I mean, a lot of the time it comes down to confidence, and and to an extent throwing caution to the wind a little bit and just having a go, just not worrying too much about the end result, because the whole process is a journey. This is what I always say to the students when I'm teaching the joys of outdoor cooking. It's not so much about the food that you put in your mouth at the end of the day. It's about
the whole process.
Yeah. It's about packing your bag. It's about getting your ingredients together, putting your grill and pan in, heading out, getting a fire going, maybe picking up some kindling along the way.
Yeah.
Taking in all the variables that are going to affect how your fire burns and what you cook. So, the weather, for instance, opening your eyes, looking around you, actually engaging in the process. So much of the cooking that we do these days, we've become sort of disengaged with it. So we're not really using our senses. We're not really using our hands. We're not touching, feeling. We're not smelling. We're not looking. Really looking. We're not feeling and gauging things with our senses. We're just sort of switching the cooker on and chucking it in,
totally.
and away we go. But cooking outside, it awakens all those sort of primal senses, and that's what's so exciting about it, as well as the great food that you come to eat. It's reigniting the sort of primal spark that we have, that sort of desire to be around a fire, to cook around a fire, to congregate, to gather around the fire. All that sort of thing comes into play.
Totally.
But going back to your original question, I completely went off on one line. What can go wrong? What should we be worried about? Well, it's all about managing the heat. It's about getting the heat right. If your fire's too cold, then your chicken's going to be raw in the middle. If it's too hot, it might be black on the outside and still raw in the middle.
Yeah.
So it's about getting that heat right, getting your grill at the right height, and experimenting and playing around. And as I say, having the confidence to just shift gears when you need to, and experiment.
Completely. And I always think it's quite unfair on people who perhaps haven't done it very much, because the first thing that a lot of people cook on a fire is a sausage. And sausages are really hard. I cook sausages in a frying pan on the fire because, of course, they drip the fat through the grill and then they fuel the flame, and then you get that burnt, raw contrast.
Totally.
And
notoriously tricky to get right.
And yet, people go to their local supermarket and think, okay, well, it's a nice day, let's get sausages. And they're the worst. So I think the least fatty your thing is, which is why, stuff like venison and fish is just so much.
Oh, exactly. And sausages, that they can trick you because they look cooked.
Yeah.
And then in the middle. And in fact, we went for a walk the other day and we met some friends, and they were in their camper van in the car park up at Worth Matravers in Dorset, stunning part of Dorset. And they were cooking sausages in the pan in the camper van. And they passed one to Alice, my wife, and she took a bite of it, and still pink in the middle. I could see her, like, oh my God. She said, and I can see her sort of slightly gagged and gave it back to them.
Did she?
They hadn't quite got that right. But it's like...
Even in the pan, yeah.
It's like that thing where people say about, so easy. It's like boiling an egg.
Yes.
And I always think, actually, boiling an egg is one of the harder things
so
to get
hard.
right.
Yeah, it is. And in terms of you heading off with your basket, what's your favourite bit of kit? Just to sort of wrap up, what would be the thing that you really wouldn't set off without? You would turn round and go back for?
Well, there's a couple of three things. My little grill, my Arga, is an Arga toaster. You know, the ones that are hinged, that you would fit your toast on, and you can flip things over in it. It's lightweight. It's really portable. You can sandwich fish between it. You can sandwich sausages. You can sandwich sliced courgettes, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Most things have two sides, so they're going to need clipping. This makes it super easy. I wouldn't leave home without my Opinel penknife, which is indispensable. It's the only real piece of kit you need. In fact, you don't need any spatulas or cutlery, tongs even. If you've got an Opinel, it does everything. And it's a great little knife, and you can fold it up and pop it in your pocket. And my flint and striker, which is how I quite like to get the fire going.
Okay.
Because it's a reliable piece of kit, and when the matches are damp and the lighters run out, you can always get your fire going with one of those. And
what would you use as your kindling for that? Would you cut with your Opinel knife? You would cut some shavings.
I tend to clean the lint out of the tumble dryer. It just makes the best tinder. It's super dry, obviously, very fine.
Yeah.
And I keep it in my little tin with my flint and striker, and it will take a spark instantly. So. And off it goes.
Love that. That's such a good
And then you're away, and it deals with all that lint in all that fluff.
Brilliant. I'm going to butt in and give a tip which my ex-brother-in-law taught me about cooking on a fire. He's a great fisherman, and he just went off in this same place, I'm afraid, in this sort of this symbolic place in my head with the gorse bushes and the beach, and he'd caught a sea trout, and it was the days of newspapers. We don't have them anymore, do we? He just wrapped this trout in 3 or 4 sheets of newspaper and just put it in the river for a couple of minutes to soak it. And then took it back and just put it in the embers. And he did sort of 5-7 minutes on one side and flipped it over. And it was just starting to catch, but it was still wet enough, the newspaper, that it wasn't burning. And I was thinking, this is going to be a cinder. It's just going to incarcerate, No, I don't mean that. Incinerate, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. And then I was always keen on food, so he was quite keen to impress me. And he just sort of unwrapped this absolutely pristine, totally perfectly moist and utterly delicious fish. And then he also taught me this thing. If he got his penknife and he put it down to the spine in the thickest part of the fish and put it on my lip, and it was hot. So he knew that it was cooked right down, not overcooked, but cooked right down. And it was just amazing. Yeah. So nifty tip. I do that with mackerel all the time now.
That is good. I mean, for that, then you don't even need a grill.
No.
Straight in the embers.
Yeah. That was it.
Yeah, very, very nice. Very nice. And the knife on the lip is the one, isn't it?
And I've seen it since, and I've taught it to people, and they say, "Well, why don't you just do it on the back of your hand?" I don't know. There's something.
Oh, it's so much more sensitive.
Yeah, and it's sort of elemental. And actually, I remember Rose Gray from the River Cafe doing it with a massive, a massive salmon wrapped in salt. That salt crust thing.
Oh yeah.
And so you have to go through and to check. You just tap it through. To see that it's done, and that was exactly how she did it. And it was spot on. So that's
very nice.
Yeah, good. Oh, it's so nice to talk to you, Gill. And will you please come back and teach your outside cooking course at Perch Hill soon?
I'd love to. I'd love to come and see how it's all looking up there. But it's looking fabulous.
Thanks so much for listening to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me and this week, Gill Meller, the wonderful, wonderful chef. Next week, I'm on my own and I want to take you through all the things I've learned in recent years about growing sweet peas. It's about varieties a bit, but how to pick them, how to keep them healthy, everything, whether it's wet springs or dry springs. So wet spring of 24, dry spring of 25. So how to make sweet peas fantastic, whatever the weather does to us. So see you then. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.